So it's our first week back after taking a week off, and I'm a little bit nervous about how I'm going to perform with all this rust that's built up. As we all know, the only way to actually improve and break that rust off is to get in and actually get it done. So we're going to get into our practice sessions now, and these are the results from this week. My smoothness was actually alright this week. We saw a new personal best in Thin Gauntlet V2. It was only 1 or 2 points, but it still made me feel like, okay, we haven't actually dropped off as far as I was worried that I would have. So surprisingly, there wasn't much change in reactive either. Reactive is one of those ones that I find that I build up rust much more quickly. And when I come back at the start of the week, I have to break that rust off before I can actually get some good scores in. But actually this week I was pretty consistent for having that week off. And we also saw a minor gain in ground plaza as well, hitting an 877 point run. And that same story continues again with dynamic clicking. Popcorn, as usual, is the weakest point for me in my dynamic clicking regime. Pasu actually got a new personal best of 61.5. I learned this week that Pokeball is actually my most consistent scenario, probably overall. There's a variance of maybe 5 or 6 points within every run, and I never really drop into what I consider bad scores. It's very surprising, but it's also a very motivating thing to see that I am consistent in specific areas and I can become consistent in my weakest areas as well. Wide Wall 4 target small was the biggest gain we saw in our static scenarios this week. Without seeing any new personal bests, we saw a huge jump in minimums and as well as our averages, which is great to see again, because it means that while we're not hitting new personal bests, those averages still crawling along and we're still improving. Target switching felt like a bit of a letdown after all of those other scenarios, because there was nothing really to report here. All of my scores were about normal, the minimums were normal, the averages were normal, and we didn't get any new personal bests. So that's target switching this week. For dynamic clicking, Pasu was about normal, Popcorn was pretty average as we saw in the practice sessions, but the standout was Bounce 180. We hit a new personal best of 83, and while it wasn't a huge gain, it's still tracking us closer to Diamond. There's not a whole lot to report in the static scenarios this week. 1 more 4 targets got a new personal best, but other than that, everything was average. In precise tracking, we actually saw some pretty good scores. We saw Smoothbot getting a new personal best of 2,725 points, just narrowly missing out on the 2,800 points that we need for Platinum. Now, reactive tracking is the big standout subcategory for me this week. Every scenario actually saw a new personal best. Fugla XYZ got a new personal best of 12,690 points. Ground Plaza saw a new personal best of 879 points. And Ground Plaza saw a new personal best of 863.3 points. Overall, I'm very pleased with my scores within reactive scenarios this week, and especially the benchmark scores. The only thing worth reporting in speed target switching this week is Psalm target switching is a new personal best score of 83 points. Evasive was pretty average this week. We saw a new personal best in Kin TS of 66.6 points. Bounce 180 was very poor. Bounce 180 was very poor this week, so hopefully I can improve on those scores next week. And Smoothbot target switching get a very minor improvement of 0.1 points. So in the end, I don't believe that taking a week off actually harmed me in any appreciable way. What I did see was a refreshed mindset on what I'm actually considering good scores and bad scores, and a more focused mindset on how I'm doing scenarios and what I'm doing right and what I'm doing wrong. So I encourage anyone that's doing aim training, is feeling pretty burnt out on it or very tired or whatever the scenario may be, don't be afraid of taking a break. That rust will come off pretty quickly even if you build up any at all. That really wasn't even the case. A lot of my new personal bests were actually the first runs in every scenario. So make sure if you need a break, you take that break and come back with a fresh mind and a fresh focus on what you actually want to achieve with your aim training.